What's up, YouTube? Time for another episode of Mythic Conversations. Thank you all for joining. Thank you to everyone that is joining now, and certainly to everyone that catches the show on replay because you can't join us live. We are live every Wednesday night at 7:30 Eastern Time here right on YouTube for the show. If you've joined us before, you know the format. We start with some Mythic Legions news. We have some conversation along the way. Drew's the first one to say hello. Hello, Drew. We'll do a lot of that through the evening as you ask questions. I will do my best to answer. And certainly we have a presentation tonight. We have a certain topic that we want to talk about, that I want to talk about. Tonight's topic is actually going to be all around anthropomorphic characters. Those are animal type characters. There's a number of those that Four Horsemen Studios have put out through the years. It's something that I'm super into. So we're going to talk about that kind of character tonight. Should be a lot of fun. Once again, thank you for joining. If you are joining for the first time, if you're maybe catching this on YouTube, maybe it came up in the algorithm, you were looking for Mythic Legions and this was recommended to you and you aren't familiar with the show, this is our weekly Mythic Legion show. And if you're not familiar with me, my name is Jeremy Gerard. I'm a Mythic Legions collector and customizer. I also have the distinct privilege of working as the digital marketing manager for Four Horsemen Studios. That means that I get to bring you all the cool content at sourcehorseman.com. If you want more information and more photos of my work, including the things we're going to look at tonight, you can check me out on Instagram. My account there is Mythic Customs, all one word. You can also check out my website, www.mythiccustoms.com. Again, all one word. Pictures of all of my customs, including recipes. Those are all on my website. So if you see anything tonight that you'd like to see better pictures of, or you want to learn more about the recipe, that's where you would go and check it out. And as I said, throughout the evening, if you have questions for me, there's already a number of people saying hello because this is live. That's why it's called Mythic Conversations, because it is a conversation. So if you have a question about something I'm showing, you want to comment on it, certainly, usually towards the end of the show, we also have some time for questions as well. So people jumping on, very cool. Tony says, love the customs from last week. Thank you very much, Tony. Yeah, last week's was a fun conversation. If you are checking out my YouTube channel, all of the previous episodes of Mythic Conversations are also on the channel, so you can certainly go back. But yeah, last week was a fun week. We talked about, kind of working backwards and starting from a base figure that's easily attainable and building a custom off that. So did some cool ones based on the Chronaw figure. That was a lot of fun. So I guess we'll start with the Mythic Legions news, and the big news that everyone is talking about is certainly the 20th anniversary bundle. So that dropped a bit unexpectedly last week. In the past, they've done a lot of build up where they've announced a sale well in advance. This was pretty much the announcement and the sale happening bang right at once. So people were surprised. They had seen the listing for the 20th anniversary bundle on storehorseman.com. And when I say listing, I basically mean the text. People had seen those words previously, so they knew something was coming. And I think that's kind of part of the reason there was some discontent, I guess you'd say, around the bundle. Let's be honest, a ton of people were super excited. I was super excited. I've known about this bundle for a while. I was excited to see it finally be able to go live and everyone get a chance at it. Tony's saying, I don't want the 20th figure, just the shirts. That's funny because obviously that's some of the controversy that's been around it. Obviously I get it. There's a number of people concerned that it is $100 package. For that price, you get that awesome Equidron figure. The Horseman is what everyone called him. It's an ogre scale figure with that horse head. You also get 2 t-shirts, one designed by Nate Barch, one designed by Miss Monster, and then you get 2 pins that the design of the pins match the design that Nate and Miss Monster did on the shirts. You know, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a pin guy myself. Their pins are super, super cool. I've never purchased them just because it's never been my thing. As cool as they are, it's never been my thing. The t-shirts are great. I wear them on the show. I like that. But I get why people are saying, hey, I just want the figure. Why do I have to spend $100? You know, it's interesting because when I see what some of these things sell for on the secondary market afterwards, clearly $100 is not an exceptionally large amount for a figure. Even the ogre scale figures sell for $75 when they're outside of Source Horsemen. When they're on Big Bad Toy Store and so forth, figures that would be like Equidron, they would sell for $75. So $100 to get all that extra stuff is pretty cool. You know, the one thing that I will say, the way that I looked at it is, like, for instance, the collaboration with Miss Monster. They're fans. Like, I remember them talking about how excited they were to be able to do a project with Miss Monster. I remember them telling me about that a while back. So to finally see it come to fruition and everyone be able to see it, that's super cool. And I was genuinely excited for them, excited for my friends at the studio, because I know how much of this meant to them. Same thing with Nate Barch. You know, they're super, super close with Nate Barch. Nate is one of the nicest people you would ever have the pleasure to meet. To see Nate be able to have a chance to do a version of the Four Horsemen logo and that get put out on a shirt, that's really, really cool. So when I saw the bundle, I was genuinely happy for them that they were able to do something like that. I also know that I've heard a lot of people at different shows when I've hung out and, you know, been behind the Horseman table at like ToyCon, and I've been meeting people and I'm talking to people at Legions Con, you know, on the Cabal, whatever. I've heard a lot of people ask for Four Horsemen t-shirts, saying, oh, I wish they would do shirts. I wish they would do shirts. They've done shirts in the past and they've never been great sellers for them. So I think this was a really cool way that they were able to do something that they thought was special for their 20th anniversary. That's a huge milestone for them to be doing this 20 years in and to be as successful as they are. I'm really excited that they were able to come up with a cool way that they could recognize that. Yeah, I mean, if you want to get a bunch of these, especially as a customizer, yeah, $100 for each figure to end up with all those extra shirts and pins, that's a bit of a bite. You know what? They take care of customizers. I don't think that this particular set was really made with customizers in mind. Look at, you know, that's the way I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it for what it is. I'm really excited they got to do these collaborations. I mean, I think the designs are cool. I'm excited to get a couple t-shirts. I'm excited to get a cool figure. Not sure what I'll do with the pins. I have a messenger bag that I wear when I go to shows. I'll put the pins on the messenger bag. They'll get some use. So that's my take on it. Again, I saw a lot of people that were voicing that, you know what, I wish we just had access to the figure. It's a legitimate concern. It's a legitimate complaint. I totally get it. At the same time, I will always offer that, you know what, they've got a business to run. Sometimes when I see fans say they should just do this, they should just do this, the thing I always try to remember is the people that are making those suggestions, they don't have the benefit of all the information. A lot of times decisions are made for very specific business reasons. At the end of the day, it's no stretch to say that the Horsemen love their fans. They try to do as much as they can to support them and to please them. And those people that want a crack at this figure by itself, I mean, who knows? I mean, down the road, they said right in the press release, it won't be offered in this, you know, color again outside of Store Horsemen. So who knows? Maybe we'll see it again elsewhere. But very, very cool. Super excited that they got that live. I've already ordered mine. Hopefully you've ordered yours. They haven't announced how long the sale goes for yet, but I'm sure we have a little bit of time. So let's see. Yeah, a couple people saying, I want the whole package. I'm a fan of Miss Monster. Ryan, could the figure be sold at a later date separately? They said right there that the figure in that format is not going to be sold separately outside of this bundle. So that's the way to get it. Again, I mean, if you look at that bundle, you get that ogre scale figure, and he comes with, those two weapons. He comes with a sword horseman as well. I've seen people paying like 20, 25 bucks just for a sword horseman sword. So you get a sword horseman sword with this, plus the ogre, the two t-shirts, the two pins. I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, someone's saying, I'll buy the package and sell the horse for $100. I'll be honest with you. Once these things are out, because remember, the only place to get this is Store Horseman. So anyone who misses this sale, you're not going to have it on Big Bad Toy Store down the road. I mean, I should say that if they are going to be on Big Bad Toy Store, it's going to be because Big Bad Toy Store bought them, I guess, probably from the Horseman, and they put some in stock. But this is a Store Horseman exclusive. So anyone that sells it elsewhere, if you see it at toy shows or whatever, they ordered it from Store Horseman. To that point, you're not going to get it for that cheap. If you're paying $100 for it from Store Horseman and you're buying it to flip it, to sell it, it's going to have to clearly be more than $100. So I would say that even if you drop $100 on it now, once this thing sells out and people have it in hand and they see how cool it is, I bet you it's going for well over that $100 price. So again, that's the big news. That's really what's going on, in the world of Mythic Legions. That's dominated kind of everyone's conversation. I will also mention something else that I just think was really, really cool. I know a lot of people that watch this show are members of the Mythic Legions Cabal. This show started on the Cabal, months ago. That's where we first launched Mythic Conversations. There's something going on in the Cabal right now that I just think is absolutely amazing that I wanted to acknowledge. And that is a charity auction that's happening. My friend Rob McCallum, he's the documentary filmmaker behind an upcoming docuseries around action figures called Action Figure Adventure. So he did a Kickstarter for this, last year. Actually, was it last year? I think it actually probably was at the start of this year. Yeah, it's probably at the start of this year. But some months ago, he did a Kickstarter for his docuseries. Really, really cool idea. It's a documentary about action figures. There's also a charity aspect to it. His partner, Jay, kind of went around to different toy stores and hunted down different rare toys that were then going to be auctioned off, with all of the proceeds from the auction benefiting the Children's Health Foundation. So this is a charity that obviously helps children that have some health needs. Very, very cool. I got involved just because I really was excited for the idea. I really was excited for what he was doing. Since then, I've been able to meet Rob. I was actually interviewed for the documentary, which was super exciting and humbling to have my customs and my work be something that he wanted to talk about. But additionally, what's happened since that documentary was filmed, things have changed in the world, as you well know, and the auction that was supposed to happen cannot happen live anymore because of everything with COVID. So they are turning to like eBay to do the auctions, which is unfortunate because obviously eBay takes fees. So the more they have to pay in fees, the less that they get to donate to Children's Health Foundation. Well, one of the things was going to be auctioned off was a set of 4 Mythic Legions trolls. The original Forest Troll, the original Stone Troll, Brontis, the Arena Troll, and the Ice Troll. Those were donated by Four Horsemen Studios to Rob and Jay. And they said, hey, auction these off. Proceeds go towards Children's Health Foundation. So because of everything going on, Rob reached out to me a few weeks ago and said, hey, I was wondering if maybe you think we could auction these off directly on the Cabal. That way we don't get hit with eBay fees. And it's a really cool thing that we get to make these available to that Mythic Legions fan community. So I said, absolutely, I'd love to help you do that. We made the arrangements. We figured out logistically how it would work. I talked to Walter from the Cabal, and we launched it. So those auctions all went live last week, and the generosity of this community has absolutely blown me away. We had multiple people who won auctions for big dollar amounts. They won these trolls, paid for their winning bids, and then said, put those back into the prize pool, re-auction them again. I want to offer those again. That's absolutely incredible. The ice troll that's up for auction right now, it's actually been put back into the pool twice. That's unbelievable. So not only were we able to raise money for this incredible charity through auctioning these cool things off, but we had these generous winners who said, no, just throw it right back in the pool. We want to be able to help you raise more money. So absolutely incredible. To see that has been absolutely amazing. I mean, especially, look, we're all toy fans. We get a bad rap sometimes. We do like to complain about some really, really silly things. The way a character's smile looks, or the fact that I have to buy t-shirts with my action figure. In the grand scheme of everything going on in the world, those are pretty small things to get wound up about. But we do. And, you see those things. You see some of that debate, and sometimes, unfortunately, those debates turn negative. It's amazing to still be part of a community that can have those debates, but can then turn around when there is something like this and pull together and raise what's going to end up being probably close to $3,000 for Children's Health Foundation. So thank you very much to everyone that has bid on those auctions. Special thanks to everyone that has won and turned them back in. William Robert Post, Dennis Derby, and Grigoris Maktavish. Thank you very much for your winning bids and for turning those back over to Rob and myself to re-auction so we could raise even more money. And if you are a member of the Mythic Legions Cabal, there's an ice troll up for auction right now that you can bid on to help the cause. Awesome. So everyone's saying, yeah, that's amazing. Very cool. It is very, very cool. Speaking of very, very cool, I'm super excited for tonight's topic, partially because there's some really exciting stuff that I want to talk about and show. And if you've been following my Instagram, you certainly know that I'm talking about these guys here, the badgerines, which made a little sneak debut on the show a couple weeks ago, thanks to the eagle-eye viewer, Drew Grubbs, spotting them in the case behind me. They're actually going to get shown for real tonight. So I'm excited about that, but I didn't want to just do a show that was like an infomercial for these upcoming pieces. I wanted to think bigger because one of the reasons I'm so excited about these new headpieces, just like I was excited about the kitsune previously, the fox ones that I worked on, is I'm really into these anthropomorphic characters. So anthropomorphic meaning these animal type characters, these animal warriors. They're some of my favorite kinds of figures. And to be honest with you, it's really one of the reasons why I like Four Horsemen Studios as much as I do. So one of the first anthropomorphic figures that I can remember owning, and I meant to put him out on the table and I forgot, but he's right over here, so I'm going to grab him. So I forgot to pull this guy out, and I meant to, but he's right over there. So this is a figure called Poacher. And this elephant figure is a much older figure, actually. This is a figure from an old McFarlane Toys series called Total Chaos. So Total Chaos came out, well, more than 20 years ago, because when this came out at McFarlane Studios, the Four Horsemen were actually working for McFarlane. So we were just talking about the Four Horsemen Studios 20th anniversary pack. That means they've been around for 20 years. And this predates the start of the studio. So back when they were working for McFarlane, They did the Spawn lines. They did another of the other comic lines, you know, Wetworks and Youngblood. They did Movie Maniacs. All of those early McFarlane stuff, they really had a hand in. And one of the lines back then was this series called Total Chaos, which was really their unlicensed line. The character designs weren't from a comic book or a movie or anything like that. They were just cool toys, cool characters that the creators in the studio had helped design. So for the Four Horsemen, they were part of McFarlane's design team. They did a really cool job bringing these to life. And I remember this figure just absolutely loving it when it first came out, this big elephant poacher guy. And this one here is actually the second one they did. Colors are slightly different. He comes with this big gun. The original one didn't have the gun, but it's the same sculpt. I remember having this in my collection for years and just loving it as one of the first, like I said, like animal anthropomorphic characters that I remember having. When the Four Horsemen went and started their own studio, you know, I started following what they were doing. And I remember the first figure that they released as part of their fantastic exclusive vote. So this is going back, obviously, way pre-Mythic Legions days. A couple people asking, by the way, about when the Badgers are going to be for sale. I'm going to talk about the Badgerines later on. Someone said mid to late July. That is correct, but I'll talk all about that once I get to there. First, I have a whole lot of stories to tell. So as I was saying, the fantastic exclusive vote, for those that weren't around, it was a really fun time. Because what they did, if you were part of the early Mythic Legions, the Mythic Legions 1 vote, where they voted on the Blood Armor Borgus Vermilius, or even the Advent of Decay wave, where Ravina became the fan exclusive figure, that voting process was similar to what happened back in the day with the fantastic exclusive vote. But back then, it was even broader, because it started with a number of different lines. Like, it was like, okay, here's some characters from Seventh Kingdom, here's some from Gothtropolis, here's some from Symbiotech, here's some from Magma Core, here's some from Warriors of the Zodiac. Those are all real lines. Those are all lines, many of which you may have never even heard of because they never got produced. Keep your eyes on Source Horseman. I will be writing articles about all of them and showing some really cool stuff that you may never have seen. But what would happen is fans would vote and they'd say, okay, I want this line. So they'd vote Seventh Kingdom, and then they would say, okay, well, here's a bunch of characters that we could make. Which one do you want us to make? And people would vote, and then they'd vote on the weapons and the articulation and the size. And through all of the fan voting, a figure would be produced. And that's how the first Seventh Kingdom figure, Zethius the Blue Minotaur, got released. That's how he got produced. I actually have one of the variants here. I do have Zethius in the case, but I grabbed this one instead. This is one of the variants they did. This is a character they called the Keeper of the Black Labyrinth. So back then, what they did with their figures, and you know, it's nice now with Mythic Legions that we don't really have exclusives. Again, the 20th anniversary is a Four Horsemen exclusive. Outside of the Sir Valgard, which was a Kickstarter 1 exclusive, there haven't been any exclusive figures. All of like the PowerCon figures, those are called show debut figures because they're available elsewhere. Back during this era, there were exclusive figures. You could usually buy an entire wave from storehorseman.com, but if you wanted individual figures, say you just wanted this guy, I believe this one, the Keeper of the Black Labyrinth, was an exclusive to a website called Raving Toy Maniac. So you literally had to go to all these websites and hunt them down individually and pay for shipping individually from those websites. Or again, you could buy the whole wave. But I remember when I first saw these, I bought Zethius, and I actually bought this one as well. I really like this deco. And I just like the fact that it was like I said, a Minotaur. It was like an animal character. I really dug that. And this, I think, set the stage for what was going to come with me and my love of Four Horsemen Studios, because the next figure they did remains one of my favorite figures to date. And that's this beast of a character back here. So this character, which you're going to notice is on a figure stand, and I'll talk about why in a moment. This is Ramathor, the elephant swordsman, also from the Seventh Kingdom wave, or Seventh Kingdom line, I should say. This remains one of the coolest figures I think the studio's ever done, and it's huge. So I grabbed an ogre out of my case today just so you could see the size comparison. It is as big as an ogre. I remember when we got these in Mythic Legions, everyone was so impressed with the size. I was like, they've done figures that big before. They've done Ramathor. And I think that the reason the ogres came out as good as they did is because some of the stuff they probably learned on Ramathor. So this is a figure, as amazing as it is, that had a really, really troubled past. Its entry into the world was not without problems because the figure is so large, and fans voted him to be that large. They wanted him to scale with the Minotaur figures previously. When that got released, when the first figures came into the studio, and I remember buying these figures directly from the Four Horsemen all the way back when they were released. I remember that first wave came in, and unfortunately, the limbs were like wobbly, like the joints were not tight, in part because the figures themselves were so big and heavy. The joints couldn't hold up the weight of the figure. So the entire first run of figures was very, very problematic. And then if you check out saucehorseman.com, I wrote a whole article about this, but basically what happened was they went to the studio to say, hey, the factory to say, there's some problems here. We got to fix this. And the factory was gone. They shut down production, and they took all of the steel molds, which are the most expensive part of making these figures, and they just kind of threw them outdoors, exposing them to the elements where they got damaged. Luckily, some friends of Four Horsemen Studios, some friends at NECA, helped them recover those molds and get them over to another studio where they were repaired and cleaned up, and they were able to do a second run of the Ramathor figures. And when I say Ramathor, I mean all of them. That line included a couple other elephants, a hippo, a boar, a rhino, and then two mutants. All of them have the same basic body style that they use throughout, just different heads and different weapons. The second wave is a lot tighter. The limbs are a lot tighter. So when you buy those on the secondary market today, sometimes you get some that are really, really tight. Sometimes you get some that are really, really floppy. It's why I use a figure stand, because I don't want them to fall. They definitely, that is an original release. So that is one of the floppier ones. That all being said, problems aside, I absolutely loved how that figure looked. And that was the figure for me that really, first of it harkened back to that poacher figure that I showed you a few minutes ago, that first elephant anthropomorphic figure. When I saw that one, it made me think of that. And it really set the stage, I think, for my love of Four Horsemen Studios, which obviously has continued today, as has their approach to using animal characters. They've done it throughout, even a wave like the Scarabus wave, or the Queen's Council wave. So after the Ramathor wave, the next Seventh Kingdom one was the Queen's Council. So these were a couple female human characters, but they put out a whole bunch of these female cat figures that were in that same wave. Now, these are definitely not my favorite figures. They're very, very thin. These are a little hard to stand. Detail-wise, they're as stunning as anything you would expect from Four Horsemen Studios. I actually, interestingly, didn't buy these when they first came out. I bought these retroactively, which is what I think a lot of people did. Granted, a lot of people weren't familiar with Four Horsemen Studios before Mythic Legions. So once they got introduced to the studio through Mythic Legions, they then started backtracking. I know that when I saw like the Balaam figure, the cat figure from Advent of Decay, I thought it'd be really cool to have a couple of these female cat figures kind of flanking Balaam, almost like as his guard. Kind of like what you see the Black Panther, T'Challa, how his guard is females. I liked that. And I actually ended up taking a Balaam figure and repainting the body, or the head, I should say, black to make my version of a Black Panther. And then I have a couple of these that I flank. So it's kind of a fun thing. I'm going to look at him in a few minutes again. I have more to say about him, but these are other figures that they've released. So the reason I point this out is you'll notice that even when they didn't have a wave like the Minotaurs or the elephants that were fan voted to be animal characters, other lines they've done, they've made it a point to put these anthropomorphic figures in. They're very, very popular and they're good sellers. The Scarabus wave of like demon-like figures, those included a couple animal-like characters. There are the three figures that are kind of based on Egyptian gods, Anubis, Horus, and Thothos. Those, I mean, Egyptian mythology, the gods tended to have animal heads. At least some of them did. Anubis, Thoth, and Horus all had animal heads, a jackal, an ibis, and a hawk, respectively. So those three figures, which I do have in the case back there, those all have animal heads. But then they also did a couple demony looking ones that had like goat and ram's heads. But at the end of the day, it's still a goat character. So even if you don't, use it for its clearly kind of demonic looking qualities, it's a goat. It's an anthropomorphic goat figure. And that kind of brings us up to Mythic Legions. So when they got to Mythic Legions, actually, hold on a second. Before Mythic Legions, I completely forgot an important line, an incredibly important line that actually set the stage for Mythic Legions, and that's this guy. So this guy, if you're not familiar, this is Decimus Harabin. This is, and I might have said that wrong, this Black Raven figure, I think that we owe the success of Mythic Legions. I would say that we owe a lot of the existence of Mythic Legions as we know it today to this character right here. So if you're not familiar with this character, this Black Raven is part of the Gothotropolis line. And this Raven figure was actually voted to be created by fans years ago. A number of years ago, he was part of the fantastic exclusive voting process. What happened was he got voted, and by the time it came to producing him, the toy industry had changed pretty dramatically. The cost of producing these figures, the cost of petroleum had gone up, and because oil is one of the key components in plastic, which these are made out of, when oil prices go up, the cost of producing plastic goes up. So it cost the studio a lot of money to put these out. Now, up until this wave, they had bankrolled everything themselves. They had fronted the money to put out all of these figures, which means when a whole line of figures like the Ramathor wave were duds that they had to basically redo, they took a financial hit on that. That was not easy. When it came time to do these, they just didn't have the means to do so. Fast forward to, I believe it was 2014, where a friend of the studio, a guy named George Gaspar, who's the namesake for the G-Con event, that's where the name comes from. It's based on, it's tribute to George. He introduced the studio to Kickstarter. And he said, hey, it's a really cool platform, allowing creators to get fan buy-in to raise the money to do, their creative endeavors. So Four Horsemen Studios took the plunge. They created these figures, and they were a huge success. In addition to the Black Raven here, there were a number of other birds that were released in that first series. There's a White Raven. There's a Quetzalcoatl. That's actually one of my favorite figures. I even have the Quetzalcoatl's head tattooed on my leg. There was a Phoenix. There was a Cardinal. There was a duck, Minotaur the duck. That's a, you know, fan favorite, old mascot from the old Four Horsemen boards. Lots of really, really cool stuff. And it was so successful that it introduced the studio to a whole new group of fans, including myself. I hadn't bought a Four Horsemen figure in quite a few years by the time that Kickstarter came out. I'd kind of pulled back a little bit. I was still collecting, but not as much as I had done previously, and not as much as I do today. And when I hadn't bought a Four Horsemen figure in quite a few years. I had largely skipped the Scarabaeus wave as well as the Queen's Council wave. So really the Ramathor stuff was the last pieces that I had bought a lot of from the studio. All of my Scarabaeus and Queen's Council stuff that I have now, I got after Mythic Legions came out to kind of integrate them into my Mythic Legions displays, which a lot of us have done. So when those Ravens came out, and certainly when they finally shipped, it blew me away as a collector, opened up a whole new realm of collecting for me, pardon the pun, with Mythic Legions. Because I really do think that had the Raven Kickstarter not been as successful as it was, I don't think that we would have had they wouldn't have had the ability to go forward and make Mythic Legions happen. And certainly, if you know the backstory, Mythic Legions was intended as a 4-inch line. Because they wanted people to build out giant legions, they really, really wanted to do that. They wanted to be able to make beasts and all these other things that would have been easier to make with a 4-inch line. Because of what it would have cost to do 4-inch figures, they weren't much cheaper than 6-inch anyway. And because of the success of the Ravens, that really made the studio say, you know what, I think we need to upscale these figures to what we see now. And when I say upscale, the funny thing is, if you've ever seen the pictures from the Toypocalypse show in New York, where they first debuted Mythic Legions, all of those figures are a little bit bigger than Mythic Legions because they were 2-ups. So instead of being 4-inch figures, they were twice that size. So they were closer to 8 inches. So they looked almost like the figures we have that we finally got. There actually have a few of those at the studio. And if you compare them side by side, like if you compare one of the original Toypocalypse skeletons with a real like Skeleton 1 Legion builder, you can see the Toypocalypse one is just a little bit larger. But all of that set the stage for Mythic Legions and for future anthropomorphic figures. Now, Mythic Legions 1 wasn't super heavy. You had Asterion the Minotaur, so we got another Minotaur in there. But they've been slowly starting to give us some anthropomorphic characters in the line. But more importantly, the 3D community, the add-on community, has really embraced the idea of these animal-type characters. And we have a ton of options from those different companies. So I'm going to show you some of my favorites tonight. And I'm also going to show you a super, super easy character that you can make with like one figure and one head. And I think it makes a really, really cool custom. I'm going to check the questions before I proceed. Yeah, Tony's saying that's a crazy story about the molds getting thrown out. Yeah, I can only imagine when they found out that's what happened to them. Joe, I haven't heard anything about that line, about Primal Legions. That was something that they had mentioned previously that I haven't heard any news on that. Tony's saying, I'd love to get some female cat figures. Yep. I mean, obviously, we've got the male cats, the Jagualians. Those are really, really cool. So those are one of the races we've gotten in the line. We've gotten, I mentioned Balaam previously. So we've gotten Balaam. We've gotten the Kauros and the Purplor. So Kauros and Purplor, those are obviously the Motu type tribute figures. But even just as the cats, they look really, really cool. And I showed this a minute ago, but this is one of the figures that I did where I took one of those cat heads. And this was actually, now that I look at it, this was actually an extra cat head and tail that I had from a Cowrose figure. And I put it on a Taurian body. I swapped out the Taurian armor for some black armor from a Barbarian Legion builder. This is my version of Black Panther. And one of the things you'll notice, I mean, he's got some other parts here. Namely, he's got this loincloth, and he's got these big chunky feet. So if you watched the show last week, I talked about these feet. These are from a Stan Winston Realm of the Claw figure. Actually, they're from this Stan Winston Realm of the Claw figure. So I mentioned on last week's show that these figures are really, really cool. You can use them for a lot of different things, but the heads aren't really usable. The heads are too big. You know, the heads did pop off on these. Each one of these came with 2 heads. So I will show you, just for comparison's sake, the difference between these 2 heads. You know, those are the 2 different heads. You can see that this one here is a lot bigger. So big. First off, it would need some modification because the way it is, the hole in that is, you know, right. It's not under the neck. It's like deep inside. So you'd have to modify it pretty heavily. But if I just kind of hold it there so you can see, it's comically big. It's definitely too big a head. That being said, even outside of the head, you can see right here that his shoulder armor came from this figure. I just popped it off, and it's just actually glued onto the straps, and it does use those feet. And the great thing about the feet on these Realm of the Claw figures, and I would encourage you that if you can find a lot of these things available for a cheap price, pick them up. They're really pretty cool. These feet, you can just pop them off. I just heat them up, pop them right off. And the peg that is in there, it just pops right into the bottom of a 1.0 figure, and you can actually use these feet on a cat figure. Really, really cool. They're neat figures. They're not super articulated, so even if you wanted to get them and just display them as is, they are kind of cool figures. I mentioned last week there are 4 male cats, and there's 2 female cats. The female cats are a little smaller. You could probably fudge one of the heads of those in, and the feet are a little smaller too. We're going to talk about the female cat feet because that's actually what I used on one of the badgers. So I think that's a cool option there as well. Could Realm of the Claw be used as ogre scale? So they're a little small for ogres. And I think they're like a weird size between them. They're like a size that nothing exists for. So that's comically too small. So no, you're really not going to use them. Again, the heads, I just don't think there's any. We don't have a size in the line yet that really would fit this. It's between the ogres and the 1.0 type size. Stan Winston head could make a cool wall mount piece in a diorama. Yeah, sure, you could use it as a trophy. That would definitely work. I love getting a figure and trying to reuse all the parts. So that's one example there. This is another figure I really like. Obviously, the Borrier figure. This is one that is available in the line. A lot of people like Borrier. The only reason I wanted to show this is because one of the things I like to do with this is use the extra fur from a Bromden Ironjaw. I thought that putting that fur on backwards kind of looked really cool. I thought as gritty and nasty as the Borrier is, giving him that fur there made him look even better. And I actually used, it's a little tough to see, but his chest there is a little bit of armor from a Lord of the Rings figure just to make him a little grittier. I thought that made him look pretty cool. Before I get into the third-party figures, I'll show you something else I did. Xylona. So Xylona is one of the great beasts in the Mythic Legions storyline. Obviously, there's Xylona's flock, which is one of the factions, and she's the namesake. So this is what I did. I had an extra Xylona head, and I actually saw um, Patrick Boyle do a custom where he took the Xylona head, painted it differently, and put different horns on it. And I thought it was genius to kind of turn that head into a male character because Xylona is female. So that's what I did here. The horns, the antlers on Xylona, they come out. They're not even in the package. They're not inside in the package because they're so big. So all I did here was I took a couple horns. These horns actually came from a Marvel Legends Odin figure, a Build-A-Figure, but you could really use any horns that you can make fit. I just sliced them so they were nice and flat, and I just glued them right on. But by kind of kit bashing a bunch of different pieces together, it's got an Elf Ranger chest, it's got some Lord Adon legs, it's got some Xylona hooves there. It's a whole bunch of different parts. I was able to make what I thought was a pretty cool anthropomorphic ranger type character. So before I get into some of the third-party stuff, I'm going to give you, oh, what did I lose? Oh, there goes Borear. I'm going to show you a custom that I think is kind of fun. That's really, really easy to do. So before I ever started using third-party printed, 3D printed stuff, I've talked about before that I started by looking at other toy lines. And one of the toy lines I looked at pretty heavily was Masters of the Universe, right? Makes a lot of sense. It's a fantasy line. It's, by Four Horsemen Studios. They created and sculpted a lot of those figures. So it makes a lot of sense that it's almost like a cousin line to this. When you think about anthropomorphic and animal figures, one of the great kinds of characters they have in the Masters of the Universe Classics line are the different snake men. So I got a couple cool snake men heads right here. So a cool snake-like figure in Mythic Legions would be a lot of fun. And a really easy recipe, you can buy these heads. Now, these are real Motu heads. There are people that sell casts of these. I like to avoid buying casts, like straight casts of other toys. I always prefer to buy the original pieces, the actual pieces, even if I pay a few more dollars. It's my personal ethical opinion. I got those on eBay. They weren't expensive, considering what you pay for a 3D head, especially a 3D printed, painted head. These were far less than I would have paid for a 3D painted head. So not bad at all. But what I love to do with these heads is put them on this figure. Now, this Kylo Ren Black Series figure is easily one of my favorite figures to customize with. I have used this figure so many times. Incredibly versatile. Now, this is the figure from the first of the new movies, from The Force Awakens. And it's actually the second Kylo Ren they released. The first one had the full face mask. The second one has him unmasked. I actually like the second one better. And the reason I like it better is for his cape piece. So on the original release, this cape piece is somewhat smooth. On this version, it's a little like more sculpted. It's got like some texture to it. I just like it better. Now, over the years, I've used this figure in a number of ways. So if you pop his head off, this, I just mentioned that little scarf type piece. I've used this on a ton of figures. I think I jokingly talked about this last week that I have so many of these in my back, in my stock room, my work room, that I will routinely just be messing around with figures, and I'll put this on and I'm like, oh, that looks so good. But then I have to force myself not to use it because I've used it so many times. Patrick says, I like that take on Xylona. You will like this Saturday's homage, Anthro. Awesome. So you're going to see something cool from you this weekend. So I've used that. The cloth robe, if you take off the belt, you can get the cloth robe off. I've used that as well. Underneath the cloth robe, he's got kind of this lower skirt piece. I've popped him at the waist, just sliced the top of the skirt a little bit, and I've used that underneath a Mythic Legions figure, like underneath the folds armor, to make extra like skirt type piece that comes down. That works really well. Incredibly versatile figure. But for this custom, I'm not going to do any of that, because for this custom, I'm literally going to pop the head off, which I already did. These Motu heads fit on the Kylo Ren body perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. Just by doing that, you can get yourself this really cool, I'm going to just fix the hood, this really cool kind of serpent character. He's obviously very thin, much thinner than most Mythic Legions figures, but I like that because that's how I picture a serpent man, a snake man would look. And it provides some cool variety for the rest of that Mythic Legions collection. Super easy. Now, as you know, I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan. There's a whole race of snake men in Dungeons and Dragons called the Yuan-Ti, Yuan-Ti. I've made a bunch of these Yuan-Ti figures before. That's how I use them. But even just as an anthropomorphic snake man figure, super, super cool. And I'll put the other head on too. Again, they just pop right on. No dremeling needed. You don't have to do any of that. And what's cool is the Motu Snake Man figures, there's a couple different heads. So even if you just pick up a few of these and a couple Kylo Rens, you can have a little kind of like assassin squad, like a little snake assassin squad, and they'll all have different looking heads. So it won't even just be like the same facial, expression, the same facial look on all of them. Super, super easy. So I want to show that just as a little inspiration, little idea that you could use. So speaking of ideas and inspiration, obviously I get a ton of inspiration, a ton of ideas just by looking at all of the 3D companies and what they are doing. I talked about these different 3D companies a couple weeks ago, talked about some of their different offerings. All of them have released anthropomorphic figures at one point or another. I was talking about the Jaguarian, the cat figures that are in Mythic Legions. My Action Figure Customs and my good friend Zombie 13, they've done like cat feet. So we're not even talking about heads right now. To actually build out and make them even more animal-like, they've created these cat feet. I actually got cat feet from Zombie way back before they were 3D printed by My Action Figure Customs. Recently, they were, obviously re-released as 3D printed pieces. Super, super cool. This is another one that they did. They did this whole series of rat characters called Rodaire. These were sculpted by Lee Robinson. He did like 4 different ones, which, just like I was talking about the snakes, how they have all different heads. So you can have a little like group of them and they all look different. It's not like you have one head just painted differently. Lee did like 4, I think he did 4 different rat heads. This is one of them that's really cool. My favorite one, he did one called Marrow Greed. That's like a really kind of decrepit looking one that's got like a cool, like I think called it a Plague Weaver hood that goes on it. Super, super cool. So they did these rat men. And I used that. All I did here was I put a little rat tail. This is honestly a little rubber piece from a Halloween decoration that I just sliced and glued right on to the figure itself. So if you want rat men, super cool way you can do that with them. Those aren't available, those are in their vault, but they've been re-releasing stuff lately, so who knows, maybe you'll see those again. Planetary Dog Toys is another company that I've talked about at length on the show. They've done a couple different animal characters, especially cats. So once again, talking about the Balam and the Kalros and the Purplor, the cat figures in Mythic Legions. If you've looked at those and said, well, those are cool, but I'd like to have different cats or different expressions, check out planetarydogtoys.com. They have incredibly cool cat heads on there that you can buy and paint. I showed one last week on the show when I showed my Shadow Jaguarian. That was like a cool lion that had his mane cut into a mohawk. Well, this is the full lion head they did. And this is legitimately one of my favorite pieces that I've seen from them. And it's quite frankly one of my favorite pieces I've painted. I love this. Once again, you can see this has got the big Realm of the Claw cat feet. This actually also has a Realm of the Claw cat tail that I used. So the cat tails from Mythic Legions are just a solid plastic piece. The ones from Realm of the Claw are actually bendy. So there's like a wire inside of there. So you can get a little bit of posing. But this is a character called Hadar. That's what Planetary Dog Toys called it. He comes in 3 different expressions, which is one of the really cool things about a lot of their figures. The cat figures tend to come in a regular expression, then like a snarling expression, and then this one that they call the battle version, where he's full on growling. Yeah, I love that one. I've seen a lot of people doing these. Nikki Nicole Cheney has done a bunch of really, really cool cat customs, including with those lions. She did one that she painted that was so realistic looking. Like the paints on it were just so stunning. So if you're looking for cat figures, that's definitely where to look. If you want to even go a little extreme there, he's even got this cool cat skull. So this is a fun one where, yeah, it's a Jaguarian. And notice what he's wearing. He's actually got this soft goods robe in this black thing. That's from that Kylo Ren figure that I just showed, where I just said I use it all the time. This is an example of using that on another custom. So this uses a Skeleton Legion builder body. Again, this tail's from a Halloween decoration, but it uses this really cool cat skull that is from Planetary Dog Toys. Most of the animals they've done, admittedly, are cats. The one other animal that you will find on Planetary Dog Toys is this guy here, a monkey, basically. Now, I made him into kind of my Wizard of Oz-like monkey. So I gave him these wings, and he actually has a tail, one of the Mythic Legions cat tails I put in there and repurposed that as a monkey tail that I thought worked really, really well. But he did this particular character. I talk about having different versions. This is one where this looks like a monkey, obviously. There's another one where there's like a third eye starting to come in right at the forehead that's starting to look a little more demonic. And there's one that looks very, very demonic where the eye's fully open. That one I used for an Oni custom. But this one looks like just like a monkey. Really, really cool type monkey. So this is a fun one if you want to get that type of a character. You could also, if you're talking about other toy lines, obviously there's the Planet of the Apes line by NECA. I've never integrated Planet of the Apes figures into my line, mainly because of this, because I already had a monkey, so I didn't need them. But one thing, they also come, if you wanted, those NECA figures not only have ape heads, but they have ape feet. So if I wanted to upgrade this with some ape feet, that's definitely a line that I would look for. And to be honest with you, I have looked for it. When I go to toy shows, a lot of times I look in like the bins underneath tables to see figures that are really, really cheap. If I just need 1 or 2 parts, a lot of times you can get those for a couple bucks. So I've been looking for a Planet of the Apes NECA figure just to use some cool feet. But that's another figure that you can grab to get a whole different kind of animal. So I mean, we've seen now, obviously from Four Horsemen themselves, they've done cats and the boar. They've done the Xylona figure that gives us kind of like a dare type character. They've also done the Minotaur, so we have bulls. Now we've seen the rats from my action figure customs. We've seen more cats, and we've seen monkeys from Planetary Dog Toys. So right there, we've already got a pretty good like menagerie that we're building out of these different anthropomorphic characters. Get that dude a fez. That's funny. You know who has a fez? I just sold the figure too. I could have put a fez on him. The Shadow, is it the Shadow King head? The Marvel Legends Professor X figure comes with an extra head of a character called the Shadow King. You're supposed to put that head on the Kingpin body, but that head has a fez, and it actually comes off. I pulled it off. I just sold that head recently. Maybe I'm going to pick one of those up to give him a fez. That's funny. I like that. So that brings me to what I'm super excited to talk about tonight, and that's these guys, the badgerines. And those are going to be available from Wolf King Customs. So if you tune in every single week, you saw a few weeks ago the kind of funny interaction where I've been working on these. These are parts that I personally commissioned for myself from Walter DeMarco at Mass Customs. So I've had these pieces. He sculpted those for me, and then the parts were sent, or the prints were sent to Len LaGuardia of Wolf King Customs. And just like Len did for me with these Kitsune fox heads, Len printed up these badger heads for my personal use, and then asked me if he could also offer them for sale, which I was thrilled to be able to say yes to. Seeing what people have done with the fox heads, with the Kitsune heads, has been incredibly rewarding. I'm very much looking forward to that with the badgers as well. But having painted the badgers and having worked with them myself, I've had these customs done for a few weeks. So I had put them in the display case because I was done photographing them. That's usually how I work, is they stay in the workshop until they're done. But even when they're done, they don't go in the cases until they're photographed. Once they're photographed and I know that, okay, I don't need to pull them out again for a photo, at least not right now, then they can go to their semi-permanent home. That's where they were. The badger and the Wolverine were in the case behind me. And we had just started to show a few weeks ago, and Drew Grubbs pointed out, because the badger, you can see the black and the white, he obviously noticed it, and he said, "Hey, is that something new in the case? What is that?" And I realized that I had made a mistake. I totally didn't think that they would be seen right there. I left them in full view, so I had to pull them out of the case. It was actually a really funny interaction. I'm kind of happy it happened right now, but I'm even happier that I get to share them with you today. So I talked about the Kitsune. When I first did these, I've told this story before. I always wanted these fox customs, and I worked with Walter DeMarco to sculpt these cool fox heads, both a regular style head and one that would fit inside of a hood, as well as these fox tails. So I had him sculpt those for me, and these were the first products that my friend Len LaGuardia released through Wolf King Customs. We did a painted sale of them. I painted up some that he could sell on the website, and then he did an unpainted sale. And seeing the incredible creativity of the community, I saw someone this week actually take one of the regular Kitsune heads and round off the ears, and so instead of pointy ears, they had rounded ears, and he turned it into a red panda. So incredibly inventive. And then I remember seeing Sean Shaw, who painted one like an albino, like it was white with a pink nose and red eyes, a female character. I think he used a Ragnar Stormforge body and painted some pink highlights on it. Super, super cool. Timothy Peake, I just saw him doing one where it looks like he's scarred like the face of the Kitsune. Really, really cool stuff. And those are just some examples. Patrick Boyle did one that was like a female that he did actually, I guess, as a surprise for his wife, and it had a lute and everything. Super cool stuff. The creativity has been absolutely incredible, and it's actually fueled me to want to, oh, I'm Sean Shaw. Hey, thank you very much. Yes, nice to have you here. It's funny because you see screen names on YouTube and then you see the regular names on Facebook, so you don't put them together sometime. Yeah, Drew, Soul Haggis. That was great. He posted, Patrick today posted like an album cover that had, it was like a fake group from Mythos, a music group, Soul Haggis. Awesome. But that led me to me sitting down and saying, you know what? I really love the anthropomorphic figures. I had so much fun doing these Kitsune, in part because it was the first time I got to work with creations that I created. You know, all of these other parts from my action figure customs and from Planetary Dog Toys or from Masters of the Universe, those are things created by other people. As cool as they are, I had nothing to do with bringing those to life. Now, certainly I can take the parts themselves and make customs and bring those customs to life, but to really create something totally from my mind, to say, I really would like a custom like this. I can't find the parts, so I'm going to work with someone to create them from scratch. I don't know how to 3D sculpt. So being able to share my vision and essentially art direct a project to create those kitsune heads was incredibly rewarding for me. And as I've been saying, it's gotten more rewarding to see other people using them. And that got the bug. That got me itching for, I want to do more. And I want to do more kitsune heads. So the fact that Len and Wolf King Customs are now doing this as a business, they're producing other stuff. They just did a sale of parts, from Emil Wickman, as well as some other stuff. It made me want to do other parts and other critters. And that's really how these guys came to life. So I call these the badgerines because while I originally wanted a badger, and I did have a few people, by the way, I should say this, my friend Dennis Derby had actually said that he was going to paint a kitsune head like a badger because he wanted like an American badger. And that made me think about it. And then someone else had suggested, hey, you guys should make badgers. And then interestingly, I was looking at some customs and I was trying to make the four characters from Hogwarts. So I already have Gryffindor, and I just did a snake. So I have Slytherin, and I have plenty of bird figures. So I have Ravenclaw, but I realized I didn't have a badger to represent Hufflepuff. And this was a big problem because my wife and my son are diehard Hufflepuffs. So they were very upset that I didn't have a badger to represent their house. Now, myself and my daughter, we're both Gryffindor all the way. So I had my Gryffindor, but I didn't have my Hufflepuff for my wife and son. So I decided I need a badger. I talked to Walter DeMarco from Mass Customs, and I said, hey, I'd really like to do a follow-up to the kitsune, same kind of style. I want them to fit together, but I want a badger. And then when I got it in, this is exactly how I imagined painting it. Obviously, that iconic black and white type look. But when I got it in hand, I was looking at it and I said, you know what? What else could I make with this? Now, with the kitsune, I didn't make it into other animals, but I painted not only the classic orange fox, I also did a black fox, and I did a white one for an Arctic fox. I also did one that was like red and oranges that I call the fire fox. I painted it like flames. With this one, I said, well, how else can I paint it? Of course, I could have painted it like a honey badger. But I also said, you know what? What other animals have the same facial shape of a badger? And a wolverine. So a wolverine has that same kind of facial shape. So I looked up pictures of wolverines so I could paint it like that. But if you're going to make a wolverine, you got to have claws for him. So when I painted this wolverine, I also contacted Walter DeMarco and I said, hey, can you sculpt me some cool like hand claw weapons that my Wolverine can use? And that's where these came from. And they're super cool. They fit right in the hands. And you can see. Very, very cool pieces. So super excited about these. The plan as of right now, as far as I know, Len is figuring out, he's obviously working on fulfilling orders for the most recent sale he had, and he wants to make sure that he's got that well underway before he offers anything else. He's also trying to be mindful of people's pocketbooks. You can only buy so much, certainly. But the plan that he said to me is he'd love to do one sale a month. So he did the last sale in June. So he's hoping that mid to late July, and he'll give plenty of advance notice, as will I. Mid to late July, he's hoping to do a sale for these. That's his plan. And the plan is that these will be offered as both painted and unpainted heads at the same time. I know when he did the Kitsune heads, he did a painted run first and then did the unpainted after. This time he's going to offer them together. So if you're a customizer that wants an unpainted version of these, you'll be able to get that at the same time as people who want a painted version can. And I am going to paint some versions, some of these to sell. I've heard loud and clear from a bunch of people who love having custom figures but aren't painters themselves. They've said they appreciate the fact that they can get painted versions. That means a lot to me. I said this previously that I love when people like my work enough to want to put it in their collection, but I know that not everybody can afford one of my full customs that I sell. So being able to have someone buy just a head that I've painted and pop that on another body using a recipe that maybe I've created, that's really rewarding as well. It gets them something in their collection that I've actually helped create without them having to spend the money on a full custom and what that would actually cost. I posted today a number of simple recipes using these heads. I really like, this is obviously a more complex one. I really like the badger head on like a Silver Dwarf Legion builder or a, what else did I put it on? A Borrier. So taking a Borrier figure and swapping out the hoofed feet for some regular feet. I think he looks great on that as well. A Joran Rune Shaper. I like the Wolverine head on, I actually really like it on a Sir Bromden Ironjaw. I know he's available for pre-order on Big Bad. A Cavern Dwarf, he looks good on. I also put him on a Gonks. Those are some figures that are somewhat available. Hopefully just a lot of them are on pre-order right now with Big Bad. All of these heads, I think, look really good. You can also do it on a goblin body if you want. And this is one that I know a lot of people are going to ask about that I haven't actually shown yet. So I did paint it as a skunk because I know a lot of people are going to see it and say, hey, I really want to do that as a skunk. So I think it works really well as a skunk also. This style will not be available, this painted style. Obviously, if you buy an unpainted one, you can do it. And the reason it won't be is because if Len is going to do skunks, he also wants to do a tail. And the Kitsune tail, he did print some of those backwards for me so I could use it as a skunk tail. I've done that, but he only printed a couple of them. There are some kinks he's got to get out to be able to do those effectively in that way. He needs to print them hollow to do them in that way. That's a little bit more complex. So the plan is that the skunk painted version will be available down the road along with a skunk version of the Kitsune tail. But you can see this is actually on a goblin body. And the small frame, I like on the small frame. I actually like the badgerine heads better on the thicker dwarf frame, but they realistically will work on either. I did also mention earlier that the badger that I have here uses feet from a Realm of the Claw figure. These, you can see, are considerably smaller than these. The ones on the badger are from one of the female cats from Realm of the Claw. So they still plug in perfectly fine into a 1.0 body. They're just a little bit smaller. I'll also point out this fun little piece here, this little stick sword. This is one of the pieces that will also be available in the sale with the badgerines. And I saw someone asking, have you used any non-Mythic Legions hood with the Kitsune hooded head? I have not. The only other hood I have in back is from a Marvel Legends Dr. Doom figure. And you probably have to trim the back of the Kitsune head a little bit. I think the hood on the Dr. Doom figure is not as deep as the hoods on Mythic Legions, so I don't think it would fit as well. These are pretty big hoods, and the heads were very much engineered to fit inside these. So you'd have to look at some others. I have seen people use the heads not with hoods. I saw somebody, and I'm not remembering who it was, but someone made almost like a cool gunslinger type character, and they used like a hat on it. And my apologies if for me not remembering who did that. I frankly have seen so many amazing kitsune customs that I remember the custom, but I've forgotten who the artist was. I will point out that as well, for those people that missed the kitsune painted parts, there are a number of people that wanted another shot at those. There will be a small number of painted kitsune pieces available in the upcoming sale as well. I don't think there's going to be unpainted kitsune parts. That remains to be seen whether or not Len wants to do that. There already are a number of parts that will be available between the badger heads and the hand claws and stuff. So we'll see how much he has time to actually produce. But there will be some kitsune parts in there as well. Let me look at a few questions here. Adrian, you are correct. Planetary Dogs has pig heads as well. So nice companion to go with the Warrior. He's got a pig head he calls, is it Gus? I think he calls it Gus. And he's got a regular one and a scarred one. Actually works great with the big fat torso if you get that from Planetary Dog as well. Bring a Pow says, any idea how to get the right color you want when you're trying to paint your custom? I think it depends on what you're going for. Obviously with this, and I will do tutorial videos on how I paint these, just like I did with the kitsune down the road. But black and white is obviously easy because, it's black and white. With the others, like with the browns, I actually tested a few different browns with the Wolverine to get the exact color that I wanted. Let's drop the claw. To get the exact color I wanted. But that's what I do. I will say that I'm not, like, if you want paint tips, Nikki Nicole Cheney, follow her Instagram page. She's got great paint tips. I learn a ton from Nikki. I'm definitely not as natural a painter as Nikki is. She's very good about matching colors and things like that. I very much just experiment. I love to find colors that are what I call out of the bottle that I can use. If I don't have to mix them, that is the easiest. If I do have to mix them, if I'm trying to match something, it's really hard when you're trying to paint like a head to go on, say, an orc body that has green flesh, because you're going to match that green. I talked a little bit about this in last week's show where I was talking about matching the blue of Chronaw, and I jokingly said you can cheat and actually paint. If you paint the head a certain color, paint the body that color as well. I was going from a blue. I wasn't trying to paint the blue Chronaw a different color. I was painting a different shade of blue, but almost exact. I got as close as I could on the head, and then I just brushed a little bit over the body to tie the two in together. I don't really have a great answer for how I get the right color I want. A lot of it is just trial and error or asking the community. If I want, say that I'm going to be painting like a cavern dwarf, and I want to try to match the cavern dwarf color, which is what I did here. So this base on this is a cavern dwarf. When I wanted to paint the claws to match, I knew what color to use to match that. It's a Citadel color. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I had asked my friends, I had asked Nikki and Dennis Derby, I had said, hey, have you found a color match for the cavern dwarf? And they, like an out of the bottle one, and they made their suggestions to me. It's hard to find a perfect match most of the time, but you can get pretty close. So that's what I would also suggest is talk to the community. I keep dropping that claw. Talk to the community, ask questions, and they'll certainly help you out. Drew saying the claws are awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. That's actually what you're seeing there, it falling. That's actually one of the changes that has been made. The handles I felt were a little too small. They're not tight enough in the grip, especially. They actually work really well on a goblin, but on the dwarf styles, we made them a little bit thicker. So I had Walter go in and just thicken that a little bit so it'll be a bit of a tighter grip. But yeah, they look really, really cool on the goblin scale as well. I like that a lot. I did a goblin custom that I used these, and they look super cool. Yeah, I think people are really going to like these when they get them in. They're going to like the claws, especially if you put them on like a gladiator type figure or something. I could picture a Calavius with like two of those, as his weapons of destruction. Throws money at screen. Well, you won't be throwing it at me. You'll be throwing it at Wolf King Customs, and that'll be a few weeks. But again, thank you for everyone for your enthusiasm for them and for saying anyone's going to buy them. I appreciate that. And this is just the beginning. There are lots of other ideas that I have. So if you saw on my Instagram, if you saw on Wolf King Customs today, they posted a logo for something called the Coliseum at Woodhaven. So what this is I was talking to Len, and he sees that I write stories. When I post these customs on my Instagram page, I don't just say, hey, I made this new Badger custom. These are the parts I used. I create a character. So this is Brother Tsai, and I wrote a storyline for him and what he's doing. He's a wandering monk. He's part of an order called the Order of the Stone Lotus. And if you followed my work, I have a whole bunch of other monks from the Order of the Stone Lotus. I love the realm of mythos, but one thing I really love most about it is that I can create my own version of it. We all do that. We all create our own characters. We all, fudge our characters differently. We bring in toys from other lines. We say, hey, I don't want this character to be part of the Legion of Aether. I want him to be part of the Order of Etheron. So I'm going to change this around. That's what's so much fun to do. So I write storylines for my characters. So Len said, hey, what would be really cool? You're kind of critter crazy right now. You're doing all these different critter type characters. What if you tied them in together somehow? So the way I tried to tie them in together is creating this community called Woodhaven. And basically it's all these anthropomorphic type characters, and they get along most of the time. But when they do have disputes, they settle those disputes in an area called the Coliseum at Woodhaven. So it was basically just my way to pit different characters against each other. They don't have to be good and evil, because neither of these characters in my eyes are evil characters. They're both kind of good guys. He's a wandering monk. He's Wolverine, so he's the best there is at what he does. But I don't picture one as a villain and one as a hero, but I can have them battle each other, not to the death. They'll battle each other in the Coliseum at Woodhaven. So that fun little brand is something that Len's going to be able to use for even some of his animal characters, because that's one of the cool things is Len's really into the anthropomorphic stuff as well. So he has some animal character ideas that have nothing to do with me that he's been working on. They're going to be able to be under this brand, and then certainly I can do it. And I'm super excited because someone just asked, is there no wolves? Absolutely. That's one of the things that I can tell you. I know a lot of people have been asking for wolves. I've kind of teasingly said, look, the company's name is Wolf King Customs. They're going to do wolves. I'll tell you all right now that is the next project I'm working on with Walter DeMarco from Mass Customs. So Walter and me right now have been going back and forth. Walter is sculpting some wolves for Wolf King Customs. I'm directing those because it's something that I really want to do. I had my own ideas, and I said, hey, Len, have you done anything with wolves yet? And he said, no, I think it'd be really cool, but I haven't done anything. And I said, well, I have some definitive ideas. I'm going to do some wolves. As always, I'll send them to you to print from me, and you can do what you want with them. So I know a lot of people have been asking. Len hasn't officially announced that yet. Hopefully I didn't just get myself in trouble, but he's going to be doing wolves. So everyone that's been asking, they're coming. Yeah, Operational Wolf Shadow. Looking forward to when you do podcast style shows with guests like Nikki Nicole. It's on my list of things to do. There's a couple different software that I've been trying out. I frankly have just been so busy with some other projects that I haven't been able to commit the time to doing the work that I need to do to get the technology all sorted, because I want to do that as well. I genuinely love talking to them. I do get to talk to them quite frequently, and I would love it if other people would benefit from the back and forth that we do just as creators, kind of sharing our love. So it is absolutely on my to-do list, hopefully sooner rather than later. Jeremy, do you talk about where your customs fit into Mythos as part of your personal world building? So if you look at my Instagram page, all the posts I do there, I write little stories for the characters and I kind of work them into Mythos. I do try to be careful because of the role that I play with Four Horsemen Studios. I don't ever want there to be confusion about like, well, is this official? None of the stuff I do is official in any way. This is literally, I was doing this long before I was working with the studio. So this is completely separate. So I do try to be mindful of that. Like even with Woodhaven, when I wrote the little bio for Woodhaven, I didn't say it was like a part of Mythos or something because I didn't want there to be any confusion. I didn't want to tie it in. It exists totally separate. But for my own personal stuff, yeah, a lot of my characters, I do work them in to Mythos. Even before we actually had the official map of Mythos, I was trying to think about where the different kingdoms were. I did a whole bunch of like characters that were very Arabian Nights inspired, like genie type characters that I imagined coming from a whole other very Arabian, desert type land. So they definitely do exist in my version of Mythos, but I try not to be too over the top with that because, like I said, I don't want there to be any confusion. Oh yeah, Leland did the Gunslinger Kitsune. Thank you, I appreciate that. Patrick saying I already have 2 customs planned for the badgerine head. Awesome. Like I said, seeing what other people have done has been really, really fun. The Wolverine is Chris Jericho. No, the Wolverine. I assume that's because I said he's the best there is at what he does. No, that would be Wolverine. Are there going to be non-mammal heads planned? Yes. Yes, there are. There are some other non-mammal, non-critter type stuff coming, for sure. uh, Darcy, are you going to do different expressions on one type of animal, just like the other sites do with the cats? So again, I art directed these. Had I known I was going to make the badger into a Wolverine, I probably would have asked for one snarling, because my Wolverine does look a little docile. I admit that. So maybe down the road, I will do more expression. It's not something I've really explored too much. I've been more focused on just doing one head as opposed to a lot of expressions, but I know that it's been popular with the other sites. So never say never. Mythic Customs, AEW, and cigars. Wednesdays are the best. Well, I'm happy that I'm part of that little trifecta there. Darth saying it would be great for army building. Yeah, that's a point well taken. That if you want to have a few Badgers or a few Wolverines and you don't all want them to have the same facial expression, it would make sense. So it's absolutely something to explore. And I mean, the reality is what I do know about digital sculpting is once they have the model, changing some little aspects of that, they're not terribly difficult to do that. So to be able to make it snarling or other expressions, that is absolutely something that we can explore. Did you miss lizard heads? No, there haven't been any lizard heads. I showed a snake head from Masters of the Universe, but no one's mentioned anything about lizard heads. Open mouth versions would be incredible. Demon saying, with all these great heads, I really need Four Horsemen to do the always in stock Legion builder thing. It's coming. I mean, they've said before that they are coming. They are. That's all I can say is they are coming. Before we know it, we will have access to Legion builders on a more regular basis. Awesome. So that is really what I want to talk about tonight. hopefully you enjoyed this. I know this was kind of a different kind of episode. It's a little bit of everything tonight. We definitely talked about some history. I know some people really like when I tell, stories of the good old days, and I whether I'm talking about, the old Kickstarters or, Mythic Legions 1, whatever. I know some people like me talking about some of that historical stuff, so we definitely covered that today. We did look at a bunch of different customs. We talked about some different companies. We also did, that little kind of quick tutorial looking at the Snake Man figure that you can make. Super, super simple. So a little bit of everything, not a whole lot of hands-on type stuff, but hopefully this was, a fun conversation for you, a little, hopefully inspirational. Hopefully some of my love of the anthropomorphic figures will rub off on you, and you'll grab some of these. Again, there's a nice array of different characters with more on the way. So very, very cool stuff. I'll answer a few more questions before we call it a night. Darth, you're very welcome. My wallet is ready for those Legion builders. Yeah. Again, it'll be nice once they're more readily available, because they do provide such a great base to customize from. I was just writing an article today about getting started customizing, and one of the tips that I offered is start with Legion builders. They're less expensive. They don't have all the paint details. Even just starting by painting in some details gets you some familiarity with the parts. But the problem is we can't get our hands on Legion builders yet. So it'll be very exciting once we have those regularly. Adrian, thank you very much for the kind words. Tony saying, what are the Legion builders? I'm new to the line. Okay, so Tony, there are a couple different kinds of figures in Mythic Legions. And if you go to sourcehorseman.com, there's actually a whole article about Legion builders. But in a nutshell, when they first started the line, Legion builders were created to be the same kinds of figures, the same body sculptures, but with far fewer paint applications. Because a lot of paint applications increases the price of the figure to us, the consumer, what they wanted us to be able to do was army build some of these characters, legions of knights or goblins or dwarves. So the Legion builders are figures that have the same great sculptural details as the rest of the line, but the fewer paint apps allows them to lower the price. So instead of a figure being normally, say, $35, a Legion builder is $18. That's at least what they were during the Kickstarter. Might be like 22 now. They might be. I think when they sold them on the website, they were more like 22. But that's what people refer to as Legion builders. Customizers love them because they are lower cost, and if they're going to paint them anyway, might as well start with more of a blank slate. And because they're cheaper, we can get more of them. Hopefully, in a nutshell, that answers your question. Again, go to sourcehorseman.com, look at the blog section. There's a whole article called What Are Legion Builders that will explain this in great detail. Rafe asking, any talk of base bodies for all the heads we're getting? So if you're referring to the badger heads that I'm specifically talking about, the badger heads, I think they work really well on dwarf bodies. Those are my favorites. Actually, if you go to wolfkingcustoms.com, because Wolf King's going to be putting them out, if you look in their menu, they have a link called recipes. And one of the things that I try to do, I did it for the kitsune, and I also did it for the badgerines, was I gave Len at Wolf King a whole list of recipes for these characters. So like with the kitsune, this is just an elf ranger body that has had the elf ranger head removed and this fox head put in that hood and the tail added. This is a super easy recipe to follow. This recipe is on the Wolf King site. When it comes to the badgerines, both the badger style and the wolverine, there's a number of easy base bodies that I think look really good with those. They're all right there on the Wolf King Customs recipes page. Go check that out. Jeremy, are you able to confirm if the vampire soldier and the like are Legion builders? They have the character bio on the side, but I know they don't have the lower price point. So again, this is something that I cover in that article. Those are not Legion builders. all of the people confuse Legion builders with generic characters. So like, for instance, something like you just said, the Vampire Legion builder or the Shadow Elf Warrior. So the Shadow Elf Warrior, that's a $35 price point figure. If you look on the package, he doesn't have a bio because the Shadow Elf Warrior and the Shadow Elf Ranger, they're not unique characters. Now, if you look at the package from Malachi Cinderhorn, he has a bio because he's an individual character. Those Shadow Elves that I just mentioned, those $35 price point figures, those are not Legion builders. Legion builders are the lower price point figures. From Series 1, they are the Silver and the Bronze Dwarf, the Skeleton and the Gold Skeleton, the Silver Knight and the Gold Knight. Those are Legion builders. There's a Templar Legion builder. From Advent of Decay, we got the Vampire Legion builder, and that was the female. We had the Elf Legion builder in the gold. We had the Steel and Iron Knight. Those are all Legion builders, okay? The Cavern Dwarf is a Legion builder. The Goblin Legion builder is a Legion builder. When they refer to Legion builders, that is what they mean. They don't mean the generic characters. They also don't mean the big deluxe sets, like the Barbarian builder set and the Knight builder set. Those are not Legion builders. I think people get confused because they use the word builder in the names, which is probably not the best marketing plan. But whatever, they use that name builder. That causes some confusion. Again, the article on Source Horseman about Legion builders explains all of this, but that's kind of an overview of what are Legion builders and what aren't Legion builders. Can we expect to see those in stock? If you're referring to all of the generic characters I just mentioned, like Shadow Elves and Shadow Rangers, I don't believe they have plans to make those in stock all the time. Some of them are still available on Big Bad Toy Store, but I don't think that's going to start expanding into everything being available all the time. That's certainly not in the plans for the line, at least not as far as I know. Yes. Can a custom be a Mythic Legions customs if no parts are Mythic? So there's no rules. You can do whatever you want. When I do customs, I tend to try to use at least one Mythic Legions part. Like even in this custom here, if I was going to finish this up, I'd probably give them like some Mythic Legions weapons, or maybe like a little Mythic Legions pauldron armor hanging over his shoulder or something. I try to work in at least one Mythic Legions piece if I can. But that's my personal preference. If you make a custom figure and you make it specifically to go with Mythic Legions, but it doesn't use any of the parts, that's totally up to you. That's one of the great things about being a customizer is there are no real rules you have to follow except for the ones that you impose on your own work. Awesome. Well, with that, we are at 9:07, which unfortunately that means it's the end of another Mythic Conversations. So with that, I'm going to say goodnight. I'm going to also just tell you all one more time, thank you very much for joining. If you do enjoy this, like the show, leave comments on the show. All of that stuff is helpful. It lets YouTube know that people actually dig this so they can recommend it to other people. Certainly, if you're not subscribed to my channel already, I would ask you to do that as well. It'll notify you when stuff like this goes live, and also when I do tutorial videos. So I've been doing a lot of those where I've been recording tutorial videos that are outside of these conversations. Some of the tips I offer in those videos are the same tips I offer or have offered on Mythic Conversations, but by doing them separate, it makes them a little bit easier to find down the road. So check those out as well. If you're not following me, please do so. And once again, I will see you next week. Same Mythic time, same Mythic channel, as my friend Drew likes to say. Until then, I look forward to that conversation.